So, our first topic. We're going to start with Luciano, no pressure, getting off. The first topic we're going to get to is emerging trends in real estate technology. So what we're hoping to do is really explore the latest advancements in technology that are really transforming both commercial and residential real estate. So Luciano, to kick us off, how are you finding integration of technology and with technology and physical security? How's that transforming the real estate sector, and what are some of the challenges that you're seeing in the process? And before you answer, we are sharing one mic, so we're going to be passing this around.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris, for the opportunity to be here tonight and speak to you. I don't know about my wisdom, but I will share with you what I can. And when it comes to technology and physical security, I think the future is limitless. For those who don't know, I implemented PathCom down in Toronto in 2010, so I'm a big believer in the role of technology and the potential to support and enhance security operations. What I do see on the horizon right now, everybody's talking about AI. I think it's pretty much still the Wild West out there in terms of what it can achieve, and also the risks that come with it, which is another issue that often gets overlooked. Typical of companies, certainly in real estate, they're so focused on delivering the product that security is always an afterthought, and that ends up causing problems. So hopefully, eventually we'll learn our lesson. But in terms of what I see, AI analytics definitely sort of stepping up the potential for security, giving our guards the opportunity to do more with less, using analytics to cover greater areas of the building without having to actually be there physically. So that's where I see the technology going. So what are some of the challenges that come with that? First of all, I think the education, is that part of the question you asked me? The challenges that come with that I've experienced is that the guards are often overlooked, or it's presumed that they know how that technology is going to work and how it's going to be beneficial to them. So I think often we overlook the opportunity to educate them, train them, and get them to understand how these new technologies can support their operations. And so that often leads to a letdown in the technology. You buy this great new shiny car, and then you don't know how to drive it. That's basically what the opportunity is going forward. Technology, I think, is the least concern. When it comes to thinking about future risks, I think technology is the least sort of concern that I have. Because at the end of the day, whatever you want to achieve, technology will get there. You can figure it out. PathCom was a perfect example. When I got down to Toronto in 2009, we couldn't talk to the person across the street. And we knew the technology existed. The problem was the people. Getting the managers, the security managers, the properties educated to understand that security risk is more than just your four corners. It's what's happening across the street. It's what's happening up the street. And so that's how we implemented that system. And I think that remains a key challenge with technology, is getting the end user to appreciate what it can do for them, not threaten their role, but enhance their role going forward.
Thank you, Luciano. There's a couple of things there that I took out of that. And so one of them, what I think I heard is deployment. Just, you said basically about making sure that the security guards are trained properly, they have the education to actually utilize the technology that they have in front of them, right? Because oftentimes, if we're not educating those guards, we're not giving them the proper, success. Talk to me a little bit about what that looks like. How can we get over the hurdles of, just deploying a technology for the sake of deploying it, but really doing the due diligence of, setting them up for success?
Okay, well, I know that I'm going to use body cams as an example because I lived that. We were bringing them into one of my previous employers. The guards were very resistant to it. They saw it as a way of us to observe what they were doing, to basically micromanage their actions. So we ran a pilot, and we asked for their input. And sure as we expected, by using the technology, the body cams, we started to get them to appreciate the fact that it was there to help them. So what happens when you tell somebody that they're on camera? All of a sudden that ignorant attitude goes down to zero. Guard complaints went down to zero. When people were told that they were on camera, they were on their best behavior. By the same token, the guards acted more professionally. They knew they were being recorded, so all of a sudden they were following policies, they were following procedures. When things went sideways, we were able to get that technology to bring back the footage and use it as a teaching aid to debrief the guards and say, what could we have done better in this situation, right? So that, I think, is a good example of where technology being brought in on a pilot project, getting them customized to it, getting them to understand that it's not a threat to their job, that we didn't not trust them. It was actually a tool to help them do their job better, and that proved successful because they loved it afterwards. It continues to be in place at that property, and I'm thinking of implementing it in my own operations.
Okay. One last question on this before I pass it on to Michael. So you said something earlier in your first answer, and this is something I think it resonates with all of us. So right now we're in the challenge of we're trying to do more with less. I think we can all appreciate that. We're, especially with these properties, whether it's commercial, residential. I've been to many, well, again, commercial, residential, where yeah, you go to a building and maybe that guard isn't there because they've got to run around with a contractor or they've got to do other things, guarding related. So talk to me about how technology is, again, being utilized to help that physical security to kind of be a little bit more efficient.
Okay, well, I'm not an iLOQ user right now. I have been in the past. So full disclosure, I'm not selling them, but I will use them as an example. Yeah, not yet. But I believe in the product. That's part of the reason why I'm here. And the fact is, technology in this case, we're talking locks. You know, if you're ignorant enough to think that your current state is sufficient, then you're already behind the eight ball because risk is always evolving. And in the security world, you're either keeping up with that risk or you're falling behind. There's no such thing as staying static and keeping up with the times. You're either moving forward or moving backward. So that's what I like about the iLOQ technology. They're looking forward. One of the biggest costs we have in security when it comes to access control is obviously conduit runs, you know, setting up those hard pieces of hardware in the remote sections of the building. So having to sell them on what it can do for our operations in a new way. So we were talking before over some drinks, obviously, about the benefits of iLOQ. And when you talk about the fact that you don't need conduit runs, you don't need batteries, you don't need maintenance, it has no moving parts. To me, when I've tabled that to my team, it's sort of mind-blowing. And I don't want to overstate it, but they just can't relate to it. So part of the challenge with bringing in new technology is not just understanding what it can do for you and the objectives it can achieve, but getting your existing peers to understand that technology has evolved beyond what they're typically sort of comfortable with. Today, even today, in this modern day and age, most people are still comfortable with locks. Like you talk to executives, well, why don't we just use a key lock? Man, that's like 1940s thinking, buddy. We're like generations beyond that. And part of my role is to bring them up to speed in terms of where can we go? What can we do? What can we achieve at a fraction of the cost? You're paying to replace those keys. If God forbid one gets lost, that's big money to rekey a building, right? So why even risk that? We've got a technology that can resolve that, and the education process is key to getting that in.
Cash, don't let him take my job, eh? That's dangerous. Okay, thank you, Luciano. So I'm gonna move on to Michael. Michael, we're gonna switch topics a little bit. I wanna delve more into, you know, innovative security solutions as a whole. So talk to me, how are digital, just in general, locking solutions transforming security systems? You know, give me the benefits. How are they enhancing property security?
Thank you, Chris, for having me, and welcome everybody. Full disclosure, not paying me for being here. I'm a user of iLOQ. But let me quickly take you through the history of locks and security. So you all know quickly that we all have the traditional keys, and of age we move to data or digital systems. And the difference between the traditional system or the digital system is data. We're in the world where data basically influence everything that we do. So that being said, the innovations of digital systems has allowed us to do things beyond where we used to be. I'll give you a quick example. I used to basically run a couple of properties, or manage a couple of properties, And I do remember that I used to travel almost 100 kilometers to just go open a door for a bell guy or for a tenant or for somebody. And fast forward, with digital systems, you can now do that remotely without having to leave where you are, without having to leave your desk or your environment. You don't have to burn gas to travel kilometers on end. Now, if you bring that into a micro level, you've increased security in all aspects, from safes to doors to gates to everything you can actually want to secure. And by basically evolving into a digital system, you also gather data. As Lucinio said, most of the decisions making process is done based on data, i.e. the costs, the implementation, the management, or how do you basically maintain the status quo. It's told you about people still using keys, whereby with the digital age and everything is done by remote. Now you all know about Airbnb. Airbnb, you don't have to leave your house to give your key code to your guests. Or for you those guys who have kids, the digital system allows your teenager to come into their house, doesn't have to carry the keys on his neck like my kids used to do in the old ages, and just punch a key and they're there. And it sends you notification that, hey, somebody that just gone into your house. And your camera picks up that person. Oh, that's Johnny that just came back from school. So you can see all that leverage of data or data collection and remote access without having to leave where you are has evolved into the new age of digital systems. And now digital technology is now working to safeguard us in all our day-and-day activities. And of course, it actually also helps us to improve our efficiency. Luciano and I don't have to basically travel kilometers to give access to anybody. We can manage access protocols and access credentials from our desk, and collaborate with our security team members to ensure that security is enhanced. So these are the attributes of the digital systems and the digital age that we are in. But fundamentally, everything is all run by data. And you all know it. You all get this data, all your cell phones and or your smart devices are all basically carrying data that is essential to all our daily lives. Chris?
Thank you, Michael. So I got a lot of, you said a lot there. I want to unpack some of that. A lot of questions for you. So talk to me about, because you mentioned obviously data, Luciano, you mentioned data. Talk to me about how all this access now to data. So, before when we were managing these properties, you were almost like going out there, so to speak, blind, making these decisions without really knowing the hard realities of what's really happening in the properties. You can't physically be everywhere all at once. So talk to me about now this influx of data. How is that affecting how you're making these decisions, whether it be, and I like to call this the what questions, like who, what, where, when, all of this stuff. Talk to me about that and how this data plays into that.
Okay, I'm going to use an analogy here. I'm a movie buff, and for you those who have watched The Matrix, you know that Mr. Anderson sees all that data flowing through, and you can see a picture of people or things happening. As we call it, zeros and ones, all the binary numbers. Data is important. When I see processes, people flowing through, people having accesses, I'm able to determine whether that access or that device needs to have more people going through. Are the right people going through? Are there more denials? This data collection that flows through on a day-to-day, which is in the millions of it, depending on the type of building that you operate, gives you the hard-earned, I'll use the word currency, for you to figure out and strategize for the future. Do you want to put in a more sophisticated system? Do you want to use AI that will now allow people not to even flip their cards to get access into the building? Or do you want this data that you're gathering to actually assist the tenants or your customers to achieve their transition from point A to point B in less of a time and bring all the systems on within that system? There's so much that you can gather from that data, from just accesses. Typical example, I designed a building whereby when you come into the building and you go through the turnstile, your card flashes, the turnstile opens for you just like in the subway station, and the system is integrated whereby it knows that, oh, it's Miss Smith or Mr. John that is coming into the building. The elevators will come down to the lobby and is ready to take you, getting prepped to take you to your floor. The system is also integrated whereby it tells the BAS system, building automated system, that, oh, you know, Miss Smith is going to the 5th floor. I better bring on the light because she's the first one, she's an early bird. And that's how all those data integrate. And it starts from access. From that simple card or that simple phone, in your case, whereby you turn the lock, we can integrate all other things to achieve greater good and greater efficiency. So yes, Mr. Anderson is really alive. So beware when you see the white rabbit.
I'm also a Neo fan, so. One last question before I go back to Luciano, because you said something earlier that I took note of. You talked about costing, implementation. There's a lot of decision makers in this room. They probably go through the same types of thought process that you do when you're implementing technology. So talk to me about what you guys do at Smart Centers when it comes to evaluating technology. What does a good implementation look like? What are those keys to success when you are implementing it? What are those pitfalls you want to avoid when you're doing that?
I must be very factual here. Smart Centers is very innovative, very progressive. We always want the best of the best. That's the way my CEO thinks. But notwithstanding, in terms of implementation, we want to ensure that we have the best customer experience. We're very, very customer centric. So in our thought process, we want our customers, our tenants, to ensure that they have what we call a seamless transition from point to point. So when it comes to decision making about what type of systems we put in the building, we practically put ourselves in the customer's shoes. I think like a tenant. What do I want to see when I come into the building? What type of system do I want to interact with when I get into the building? And because we have this benchmark, this strategy that our customers are always right, regardless of whatever they think of, we always look for the best technology that will get us to that point. Now, we all know that decisions are made on costs, implementation, and also management. How do you manage that system thereafter? Cost seems always to be very prevalent above all the others. But if you can, and when I do, once I can construct a sort of a scenario that basically proves that the system basically works and achieves the goal with the customer, then it's easy for me to actually achieve my peers or my seniors' approval to spend the money. A typical example is when I was looking for a system to prevent vagrants from going into the washroom. Using the normal traditional access card was going to cost me $6,000. And all of a sudden, Chris sends somebody down to have a talk with me, and I'm looking at almost a fraction of the cost. It was a no-brainer, because at the end of the day, the system works, and as long as the system delivers what is required, what the end user is looking for, then the cost is a no problem, and you're able to actually transcend and get your executives or your peers to approve the cost of implementing the system.
Okay. So I'm gonna, even though you talked about something I want to get into, which is tenant satisfaction, I'm gonna ask you, Luciano, to maybe touch on this. So talk to me about tenant satisfaction, because that's something you obviously have to consider, but it's also how do you weigh that versus, you know, obviously budgets and implementing something maybe proactively or preventatively, and again, over something that maybe a tenant's demanding you to put into. And maybe we probably all experience that most on the residential and commercial side, so tell me a little bit.
All right, well, my experience, and I've worked for some big companies, it's all the same. It really hasn't changed from one company to the other. The approach has always been, well, the tendency has always been, especially when it comes to security, you're sort of like the poor cousin, and it's the end of the year, we got $20,000 hanging around, and hey, spend it. If you don't have a plan on how to spend that effectively, you're just playing into that sort of game plan, okay? Because what you're gonna spend it on is a knee-jerk thing, and they're gonna eventually say, well, that was a waste of money. So with me, how I approached it was with my managers is get them to understand that you need to have a business case for what you're asking for, and then you've got to have a plan to get there. So the business case lays out the objective, regardless of cost. And I know at the end of the day, it all comes down to cost. But if you set the bar at the cost, then you're already down at the bottom. So let's start with the objective. What meets our objective? And then build your business case for that product. At the end of the day, if they still want to go with the cheapest product, you as a security professional, you're obligated to give them the best solution to meet that objective. And if they want to go less than that, then it's on them. My job is to tell them the best solution to meet that objective, regardless of cost. And how do you do that? If you build the proper business case, it makes it tough for them to say no, right? Build it on life safety issues, bring it on risk, liability, all those kinds of things that my managers weren't doing before. Because traditionally it was sort of like, here's 20 grand, go spend it. And they would spend it because next year they wouldn't get it back. So let's spend it. It ends up being reckless and you sort of look silly and it makes security look silly and it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I tried to professionalize my managers by getting them to understand that stop acting like a security supervisor and start acting like a manager or a director. If you start acting that way, then they will treat you that way and your opinion will be valid that much more. Okay, so for me, the objective was always the primary the objective is the primary objective. You got to know what you need to achieve, and not everything can achieve that. And there's a price associated with doing that successfully. That's where you need to be. If you start undercutting yourself, saying, "Oh, they might not go for that; it's too expensive," that's not on you to decide. You don't hold the purse strings, the budget strings. They do. Your job is to tell them what the best objective, what the best solution is to meet that objective. And if they decide that it's not, it's too expensive, that's fine. At least you've had a reasonable discussion on what your options are versus saying, let's get the cheapest solution.
Okay, so now I want to just flip topics a little bit here. And again, I'm going to stay with you here. Talk to me about a little bit about the trends that you're seeing in the commercial part of the real estate, whether it's on the technology side, especially when it comes to now we were at this hybrid mode, we were at the remote work, now we're maybe back to the office. Like, what are all those different landscapes looking like? How does security play into that? And talk to me what you're seeing.
Well, that's a big argument, one worth a few beers, which we're not going to get to tonight. But I'll try and encapsulate it into a couple of points. So, first of all, I think the biggest thing on the radar right now is AI. Everybody's talking about AI, analytics. Like I said before, technology is the least of our concerns. Technology can be built to achieve whatever you need. They can get the data. I think the biggest miss for us right now on the security side is that we assume or we presume that the technology is going to be our solution to the problem. And at the end of the day, you still need a person at the end of that equation to take that data and convert it into intelligence, right? The difference between the two, data is just data. Anybody can get data. Intelligence is having the guy, the security or girl, the security professional at the end of it to be able to take the data and convert it into actionable data. Then it becomes intelligence. And that's what I think is a big miss right now in the security industry. There's a presumption now it's physical security and technical security. Well, if we're going to integrate them, if we're going to talk convergence, then we need to talk about giving the physical side of the house, the people, the tools and the skills to use the great technology that's out there to be able to build a better program. That's it. There was another point that was coming and I just lost it. Hopefully it'll come back. Hopefully it'll come back.
We'll circle back. So last topic for discussion. It's going to you, Michael, and then I'm going to come back to you. If you
I remember.
Yeah, remember? Oh, you want to go? Okay, go.
Okay, all right. Sorry. So the other one was workspace. The workspace. Yeah, it's your fault, you Negronis. The workspace. It's changed, obviously, right? People are working from home and they don't want to come back to work. So there needs to be an acknowledgement, certainly from the security side of the house, that people may not be in the office. So what does that mean for security practitioners? We don't have control over them in that nice little space where they come into work, and once they come in the door, we got access to the internet, we control their access to what they do on there, we can track them and all that kind of stuff. That's all changed. Now they're doing it at home, they can do it at a coffee shop, right? So security needs to start thinking about how do we lock down, how do we monitor our employee activity when they're on the clock and they're at home or they're at the coffee shop without crossing the line. And I think that right now is sort of the Wild West. We haven't really thought about what the implications of that are. But if you're working at home, I think I certainly have. When I turn on the camera and it's like, okay, I'm on a meeting now, and my kids are running around the background, is it really that comfortable? I'm talking business, but my personal life's in the background, right? These are things that I think haven't really sort of been thought through yet. And we still got to work our way through that and figure out where does the company position stop, and by definition, the security responsibility to keep yourself safe, to keep our employees safe, to keep the data safe, where does that stop, and where does it become private? And I think that right now, we really don't know.
So again, last topic of the evening, I'm going to pass it back to you, Michael. I want you to put your Mr. Anderson glasses on. I want you to look into the future a little bit. Talk to me about some of the innovations that you're maybe seeing now, you're seeing for the future, along with the thought of like ESGs, because that's something we all talk about. It's a hot topic, both residential, commercial side. So talk to me about those technologies and how that plays in terms of your goals versus ESG.
Well, the technology is evolving, and it's always evolving every day. And the good thing about digital technology is that it's giving us the ability to monitor things remotely. That's the base. You don't have to be physically there. So whatever takes you from one point A to point B has been removed from the equation. Whether it's gas, whether it's walking, whether it's you're reducing your carbon footprint by removing that transactional medium from having to go to your point of destination. 2, notifications. We're now getting notifications directly from source. You're knowing what's happening at each door, at each security point or exit point at any point in time. 3, enforcement. So that Luciano can send his guys down anytime something goes wrong. You are actually reducing the time lag between occurrence and reaction. In actual fact, if you have good data, you have proactive projection, which is what the policing are doing now. All the police force want to be more proactive and to project and to use AI to actually see what's going to be happening, or where is the problem going to occur, or when is the breaking going to occur in future. Hence, all this is going to basically improve efficiency in what we do, in how you work, in ensuring that you only go to the areas that you are appointed or you're authorized to go to, and you do not waste your time basically circumventing or chasing your tail. Like in all other environment too, you find that AI is becoming very, very prevalent. Now we have AI providing data and providing integration to building efficiencies, like I said earlier on. So all these innovations are coming in. We have Airbnb, we have remote access, we have secured access, health and wealth security, name it. It is all over us. It's just around on the metrics. We're all over us. We're actually in the metrics itself because everything is evolving around us. And as we continue to progress and innovate in all things data, of course, like I said earlier, data is what sort of pushes and ensures that these systems and the innovations are being prevalent. We will continue to basically evolve and utilize whatever we have. Do you remember, I'll just leave you one last point. Do you remember when data centers or computer centers was a whole house with amount of air conditioning that used to be pumped in? Now, our computer center is this, right in our palm. When I was graduating from university, it was a whole house that was the computer center. And I had something called punch cards and tapes. I don't know whether you guys remember that. It's all gone. It's all this now. This is it. And it's even going to get smaller. So guys, innovation is all in our hands and we're in the metrics.
Thank you, Mike. So there's one, okay, as a closing statement, there's one thing I want to just circle back to. When you first started talking, you were describing how you used to drive 1 hour here and there. And my mind goes right to that ESG carbon footprint, where I'm sure there are times where you drove an hour, you got somewhere, and you forgot the key, and the lock didn't work. What do you have to do? Drive all the way back and do that over again. So that carbon footprint, we're reducing that. And so again, I just wanted to leave that as a lasting impression. That is it for our session. I just wanted to thank Luciano, Michael, thank you for being such gracious panelists. Hopefully everybody learned a little bit. We got a ton more food left to go to eat. Bar's still open, so thank you everybody.